I learned that Dr. King had made this famous speech in Washington in which he said that he hoped that one day his children would be judged not by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. And I immediately understood what he meant, because here it was. I was being judged by the color of my skin.
All right, welcome to another edition of the Journey to Freedom podcast, and I am Dr. B, your host. Just excited today. When you think about successful folks, and I talk about being successful a lot, and sometimes we get so stuck in somebody is successful as somebody who is an entertainer, or an athlete, or an A-list movie actor, or has done owns a company, or makes a lot of money, or something like that. And I think success, as I try to define it every time that we do, is if you're living in purpose and you're living with what God put you on this earth to do. My prayer every day is, dear Lord, give me the wisdom to do the things that you put me on this earth to do in a way that pleases you and serves others. And so when I think about service to others, and I think about our abilities to find ways to sell our fellow mankind. Last night we did it was a real interesting, Dr. Douglas, you will maybe appreciate this, but I did a panel last night of 3 men and 3 women, and we started talking about relationship. And so that you could kind of imagine where that goes between Black men and Black women and the expectations Black women have. And we talked a lot of stuff about, well, I don't need a man. And the other guy, well, you need, So we went back and forth. But the whole purpose of me doing that was to figure out, how do we serve each other in order to make our lives better? And so today, and I'm not going to take a lot of time introducing today because I'm so excited about Dr. Douglas being here. And I want to call him Dr. Douglas, because not only is he a medical doctor who has worked and has an extensive career in pharmaceutical medicine and chemistry, and can fix you up if you get hurt, he also has a PhD, in chemistry and in things. But it's great when we have, credentials behind our names, and we're able to, say we went to school and academically we learned a whole bunch of things that helped us. But where I think our lives shine is when we're in service to others and we're helping others. And so, part of the Hippocratic Oath of being a medical doctor is saying that I am going to serve my mankind. But at the same time, he's being able to set up some spaces. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later, that allow people a chance to have dialogue and to talk about things that are bothering them. And so, Dr. Douglas, I'm just so excited that you're on with us today, that we get to talk about the things that you're passionate about, talk about the things that you believe you're in purpose for, talk about how you're impacting the world. When we can see, one of the themes of this show has been, I don't know if I can do it, or, the successful men, they didn't know if they could have done it unless they saw somebody else who looked like them. And I sometimes I say, well, that just seems so surface. But then I look at my own life, and as I'm going to events or I'm out there, I scan the room to see how many other Black folks are in this room, or how many other folks are in this room who are doing some of the things that are making impact and difference. And so if I'm doing it, I know others are as well. So again, thank you for being on the show. Thank you for being part of our podcast. And please, I would love for you to tell your story. Start wherever you want in life, and we'll just kind of go from there.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks for the invitation. And mine is a story in which, if I can do it, anyone else can. I was born in Guyana, which was British Guyana, and came to America in 1963 on a Fulbright scholarship, and did my undergraduate work at Lehigh University. I was a Lehigh engineer. Then went on to Cornell, in which I did a PhD in physical chemistry. Went to work for Xerox, but after 18 months not getting a good project to do, I actually went to medical school. And the rest of my life, actually straddle the world of medicine and preclinical science. I spent a time at Johns Hopkins, where I trained in internal medicine, then went on to the National Institute of Health, did a fellowship in what is called neuroendocrinology, and started my career as a physician scientist at the University of Chicago. While I was there, I was discovered by the pharmaceutical industry, and then spent the next 24 years in the pharmaceutical industry, where, in spite of issues of discrimination, not only as an undergraduate and as a graduate student, but also in the pharmaceutical industry, I nonetheless rose to be the first Black person to be on the board of management of a top 5 global pharmaceutical company as executive vice president responsible for global research, development, and regulatory affairs. That was at Aventis. That company is now Sanofi. So that has been the trajectory of my life. I retired in 2004 and returned to academia. I was at MIT, which actually was a wonderful time as a professor of the practice there and the founder of the MIT Center for Biological Innovation. Unfortunately, a discrimination issue there led me to resign in protest. Went on to become the CEO of a new institute in Akron, and then retired after 5 years, which I promised to do to get the institute up and going, and went back to running a small biotech company, after which I had my third retirement. Came out of my third retirement as I sat watching George Floyd being murdered, and something occurred to me, and that led me to establish, this is in 2020, my company Safe Haven Dialogues, with the intent to empower individuals who are facing issues of discrimination, empower them to have a dialogue to deal with the discrimination issue in a productive manner. That process that I use is called reframing, and I'll be happy to describe it later. But that's my story.
Wow. I mean, what an incredible career of doing so many different wonderful things. One thing that I love to talk to our group about, and a lot of folks say I was the first Black person to do a certain thing. Do you think, and it just dawned on me now to kind of talk about this a little bit, do you think we're at the point where we're stopping to be the first, or we have to continue to push because there's still so many horizons that we have to, go through or hit or get to? What's your thought on that? Just real quick.
I'm happy that in the pharmaceutical industry, that is, no longer the case. We have, a number of Blacks who have risen to that position. In fact, our most prominent is Fraser, who was the CEO of Merck. Merck being a top company, brilliant leader. And we have in the biotechnology world a number of Blacks who have been in the executive suite. A couple have been CEOs. So I am happy that that's not the case, but I will tell you that there's still an incredible paucity. There are many talented Black men and women out there who should be in the leadership positions, should be in the C-suites in in the companies in the biopharmaceutical industry who are not there because of their ethnicity.
That is. I'm glad to hear that, and I'm glad that we are making strides and we're able to talk a lot about some of the things we did. Your story talked a lot about your professional accolades and the things you've done. Has family been a part of your story as well? The things that during your time, what is you didn't talk about it because I probably didn't ask you, but
well, I'll tell you, as a matter of fact, this often came up. I kept my family away from what I did professionally because I wanted to shield them. I'm married, been married for 57 years. Have 3 daughters, 2 of whom are physicians. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you a story to exemplify that. When Aventis was formed, which was a merger between Herx and Rhône-Poulenc-Ruhr, the new CEO took the executive group off to Italy and decided to have for a week to really work on the strategy, etc., and decided to have the wives come along. They had a program for the wives during the day, and at night we all got together. And the second night, Lynette, my wife, was very upset. And we got back to the hotel after dinner. I said, "What's the matter?" She said, "Well, all she kept hearing from the other women was, if it weren't for Frank, this merger would not have happened. Our husband said that Frank was the key. The other side was very much interested in what he and his team were doing in research and development, and he was very important, and we can't afford to have him leave." And she said, she was just astounded because she had no idea that was going on. And so that was really quite typical. My view was I did not want to burden my family the problems that I was having, and I also did not want my children to be burdened with that. I wanted them to go off to college, go off to their life with a feeling that they were capable of doing everything. And when problems arose, those problems were solvable. And it would not be because I am Black, I'm destined to fail.
Yeah. Oh, man. That's good. And and the reason I asked that, and I think family is so vitally important to all of us, because at least for me, I have 8 children and 16 grandkids now, and nowhere near where you've been able, but I don't know if I could do the things I do out in the world without being able to come home and have the support of my family. And they definitely didn't need to know all the things that were going on in my career and life and that kind of stuff. But at the same time, I needed a safe place to come home to, a place that I could come and be dad and be, husband and try to go on vacations and spend time and invest in their lives, if you will, their games and the things that they did, and try to help them. Did you kind of feel some of that as well as you were growing, that at least I got to come home every day, or did you just, come home and you were able to turn off everything?
No, as a matter of fact, well, I'm a workaholic, one. But as a matter of fact, for 9 years, I actually lived in Germany. I was commuting 2 weeks in Frankfurt, 2 weeks in the U.S., because the global headquarters for research was in Frankfurt. Global headquarters for development was in New Jersey. And so I commuted back and forth. The one thing that I did do, I made it really very clear to my bosses that when it came to any event that my kids had, I was going to be there. Because one thing happened once. My boss asked me to go to make a trip to Japan. He assured me I'd be able to get back in time for my for one of my daughters' end of year ceremony that she was having. She had just changed schools, was one semester there. She's a quite gifted kid then, a gifted young woman. And I missed it.
Ooh.
And she was so unhappy when I got home. I got home that night, but I had missed it. She had won 2 prizes. And I never missed after that. Never missed, including taking them to college, bringing them back home for the end of college, taking them on their trips to look at college and look at graduate school or medical school. No, that never happened again.
Oh, that's so neat. When we talk about identity, and you lived in a world that was probably way different than most people get to. You're at the, you're talking to CEOs and leaders of companies and, high science and technology. And how was your identity formed? Also born in Africa and coming to the U.S. and trying to figure out how do you play in these different playgrounds, I guess, so to speak, and do a good job and still maintain the identity that you hold for yourself. What was that like? I mean, when you think of seeing everything and you're like seeing George, Floyd towards the end and going, okay, who am I in this whole thing?
Well, this is a really very important question, and actually, Guyana. Often people hear Ghana when you say Guyana, so that's in South America. So it's north of South America. And when I came to America in 1963.
Okay, right in the middle of civil rights.
As a matter of fact, I came 8 days before Dr. Martin Luther King's march in Washington.
Oh my gosh.
And during that time, for the first time in my life, I experienced what it was to be discriminated against because of the color of my skin. Because after all, nobody knew me and I was facing discrimination. It was just based on the color of my skin. Mm-hmm. And I had to deal with that, throughout my career. My sense of identity had everything to do with my sense of 2 things. One, I grew up in the evangelical church.
Okay.
And that probably was sort of my rock until about a year or 2 into being here in America and watching those evangelicals who had come to Guyana and told me that as Christians, we love each other, we're all going to heaven, etc. And I couldn't go to their churches here in America, which, as a matter of fact, led me to leave organized religion after about two years in America. But the bedrock of who I was and am was formed during those formative years of my life from 6 to 20. And that was who I was. So it really didn't matter to me what people said, what they did to me. That was my rock. I knew who I was. And in a real sense, no matter how upset I was, I saw them for whom they were. And so even when I was in Germany, in a totally strange thing, people were surprised. As a matter of fact, 5 of us were sent to Germany, and I'm the only one who became fluent in German. My other colleagues said it was just too hard. A part of the difficulty I think they had was the adjustment of cultures. And for me, having come from Guyana, which was one culture, to America and having lived in different parts of America where there are different cultures, it was not as much of a problem for me.
So when I love this conversation because, all the things that you had to go through, all the things that you coming in 8 days. I mean, I can't imagine what that's like in the shock, as in your country. Probably most of the folks that were there looked exactly like you, acted like you, and to separate it, you came in with a super high IQ or super ability potential. Obviously, if you became a doctor and a couple with a PhD, you came highly educated, and then to come to a place where people look at you and believe you to be a certain person. Now, where did you enter our country at? Were you in, I think of regions, were you in the West? Were you in the East? Were you in the middle of it, the South? Because it's all different, right?
I will tell you where I came. I entered in what at the time was called Idlewild. I entered in New York City, JFK.
Okay.
And spent the first couple of weeks in a program for the Fulbright scholars and fellows, which was being held at Yale. And the following happens. After about 5 days, I was supposed to, in the small group I was in, I was supposed to give a talk. I spent time in the library because I was an undergraduate. The rest were all graduates. They were, at that time, they would bring in about 3 to 5 undergraduates amongst the 100 or so graduate fellows in the Fulbright program. And so I spent time in the library and looked at one of the professors at Lehigh and tried to understand. Anyhow, I was prepared my talk. And that morning, I awoke with this tremendous pain I'd never had before. I literally crawled to the room, got there early to be able to speak to the professor. And as soon as he came in, I went over to him, explained to him that I was in tremendous pain and could I go to a hospital. And he immediately began to scold me and said to me, "Yes, you blacks are always lazy. You're always trying to get out of work. And now you are a Fulbright fellow and you're here in America. You're going to have to work hard to deserve that honor."
Wow.
Fortunately for me, I walked away from him, found the director of the program, who took me to the hospital. And the first thing the doctor said to the director, after he quickly examined me, "Why did you wait this long to bring this man to the hospital?" I ended up in the Yale New Haven Hospital for 10 days.
Wow. Was it appendicitis or one of those things? Or
No, it was not appendicitis. Actually, it's just called epididymitis. The epididymis is a part of the testes, set of vessels that go over the testes, and they were inflamed. We don't understand why I got it, but it turns out it's a very painful thing to have. And of course,
I can't imagine. And then to have somebody tell you, evidently that professor didn't want you in the class anyways. And
probably didn't, and particularly since I was an undergraduate at that. But
oh my gosh! That's like you're only here a couple of weeks, and this
not even a couple of weeks. It was less than a week. It was about 5 days.
Not even a week, and you're already feeling this. Oh my gosh! I think it's probably one thing you were probably heard about what it was like, but then to experience it when you first get here had to be.
The fascinating thing is that later I learned that Dr. King had made this famous speech in Washington in which he said that he hoped that one day, his children would be judged not by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. And I immediately understood what he meant, because here it was. I was being judged by the color of my skin.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, so you're here and you're doing stuff, and then when we think about trust, Well, let me jump back a little bit because I want to kind of talk about this identity thing. Why you're still the expectations that were put on you from the coming as a Fulbright scholar, and they're expecting you to do these wonderful things. Did your belief in your ability ever waver after some of this stuff began, and people began to tell you you're going to have to work harder and you're going to have to do more? Or did you just say, I got this, you're not going to stop me? What was that like?
It is actually something that really helped. In Guyana, in the British Commonwealth countries, as you finished high school, we all took about the same time, actually, a set of exams. They're called general certificate exams, in some case, senior Cambridge, etc. And they are set either by London University or Cambridge University, depending on which system you're in. And what happens is you show up, you get a number. You do your exams, they seal it, they send it off to England, and then 2-3 months later, it comes back and it's decoded. So, okay. For 2 of these sets of exams, I had performed the top in the country in Guyana. Okay. I was graded by people who didn't know who I was. I was just a number. So I had no question about my ability. And I knew what my performance was, not only in Guyana, but in other Commonwealth countries, about what other people performed, at that particular time of the exam. So it was never a question for me.
Okay.
It was absolutely never a question. And in 2 occasions where I was given a lower grade than I had earned, and I went to the professors and asked them, and they couldn't explain to me why they had done that. I just shrugged my shoulder, realized what was going on. I was black. They weren't expecting me to get an A. So they gave me a lower grade, and that was part of discrimination. But my confidence in my ability never wavered. That's one. The second thing is, I was there with other, fellow students. I knew what they knew. I knew what I knew. I could compare myself with them, and so I was quite confident in my performance and in my knowledge.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, as I go back in my mind and think in 1963, how blessed you were to be born where you were born and grow up where you grew up. Because had you grown up here in that same amount during that same time, would you have even been educated in the way that you were? And would that test have ever even got graded in the first place?
I probably would not have. When I got to Lehigh, there were that year there were four undergraduates at Lehigh. 3 of us were foreign, and there was 1 African American who unfortunately passed earlier this year. But I will tell you that he was so embittered by the experience that he had at Lehigh that he vowed that he would never return to Lehigh after graduation, and he never did.
Wow.
One of my good friends tried many times to get him, and he never did. People have asked me about that. Unfortunately, in my experience at Lehigh, I had both the good as well as the bad, because I can cite as much as I can cite episodes of significant discrimination. I can also cite episodes not only from classmates, but also from a couple of deans and one of the two of the professors who treated me as a Lehigh student and welcomed me, etc.
Wow, that is so cool. And I think it's the first conversation I've had where I'm talking to a person of color that I'm saying it was better to be born not here than it was to be born, which is so cool. I mean, it just, in my mind, it makes me so happy.
No, really, it was for me. It was clear to me that it was a tremendous advantage having been born in Guyana and not in America at that time.
Yeah, wow. So when we talk about trust is one of my pillars as well, and for Black men at the time that you were coming through, right in the middle of civil rights and all the animosity and just the hate and everything else that happened during that time, it had to be hard to trust that things were going to work out after you start seeing things. And how did you develop a sense of who to trust, who not to trust, and how did that follow you throughout your entire career? Did you go into situations like you're in Germany? Did you cautionally go into there, or you just like, hey, I'm the head dog. You're going to have to, you're going to have to deal with me regardless. How did you begin to trust?
It changed. It changed over time. The higher I got, of course, is the easier it was for me to do two things. One, to determine whom I could trust.
Okay.
Because now I knew the system. I knew what the game was. Okay. So to determine whom I could trust and to determine whether I should trust.
Whether you should trust.
Okay. Whom and whether. Okay. So it changed with time, and the higher I got, the easier it was to discern those two things. At the beginning, it was very difficult. So basically, I trusted no one. I just simply, I did what I was supposed to do, and if I were not treated fairly, I accepted this is America. This is what happens when you're Black. In one case, as a matter of fact, that's what caused me to go to medical school. It was a very interesting thing. After I completed my PhD, I was hired at Xerox. And for 3 months, I couldn't get a good project. Then one day, a young white man joined the group. And within a week, he was placed in what was the most exciting project in research and development at Xerox at the time. And I remember running down, I went to see my manager to have yet another discussion. When am I going to get a good project? And suddenly I said to him, Steve, don't think of me as though I'm Frank. Think of me as though I'm Bob. And I was stunned to see the recognition sort of come over his face as he said to me, you're right. Bob has been here a week and I've put him on the artery project. Well, I was furious. I ran out of his office, down to the office of the senior vice president to give him yet another example of being discriminated against. That episode is what actually led me to go to medical school. Because my thinking then, first of all, I needed to get back into an academic type setting when the medical school issue came up as I was looking for postdocs. And then my thought was, if I become a doctor, I can see patients. I'm my own boss. I don't have to deal with this. This is the way to go. The irony was the reason they were interested in having me in medical school was because of my research capability. They wanted me to learn medicine, then go back into research.
Go back into research.
Yeah. So that was sort of the irony of it.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, you think through, how did you shield your family from some of these things? I mean, I know you didn't talk about it and stuff, but they had to be experiencing some of this stuff themselves wherever they were going, your kids and that kind of stuff. How did you?
Well, with the kids, we discussed. I told them, to discuss. There were two things I told my kids, particularly when they got to college. I said, if you think that your professor is discriminating against you, pay attention to it. First time it happens, say nothing. The second time it happens, note it very carefully. And the third time it happens, you go to that professor and you say, this is what happened. I do not think it is fair, and I do not like it, and I wish you will not do it. And they said to me, well, if I do that, they'll give me a bad grade. I said, that's the point. He's going to give you a bad grade, or she's going to give you a bad grade anyhow.
Either way, yeah.
Yeah. So which one do you prefer? I said, the truth of the matter is, if you do what I suggest, they're likely not going to give you a bad grade.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. They will now begin to respect you. They may not like you, but they'll begin to respect you. And the only thing you need from anyone is respect, not that they like you.
Yes.
And that's all that I tell the people who work for me. I don't need them to like me. I need to earn their respect. They need to respect me. I have to earn their respect. That's the deal. If they end up liking me, that's great. But that's not the basis of our relationship.
Oh, man, that's so good. So good. Let me pivot a little bit. I want to kind of talk. I mean, you're an MD. And when we think about Black men, and the last I looked, the life expectancy was 72, the average life expectancy. You have figured out that code a little bit better than other folks. And so what have you done to make sure that not only, and I want to equate it because I think mental health and physical health go hand in hand. And if I just talk about physical health, oh yeah, I did this, I exercised, I did this, but I think it's our minds that hurt us more than, I mean, you tell me, you're the, I'm not.
Well, there's something which we totally missed that you have touched on. And fortunately, we're hearing more about it right now, the term well-being.
Mm-hmm.
And the unfortunate thing is we are subjected to so much trauma that it impacts our well-being. And what people do not recognize is that the stress that we have, actually, they may think it's emotional, but it leads to physiological illness, for example. And we all know this. Stress, one of the major hormones that is produced with stress, is cortisol. Mm-hmm. Cortisol can lead to increase in blood pressure, can lead to diabetes, and Black individuals are very susceptible to both hypertension and diabetes, both of which can lead to kidney failure and heart disease. So you have there, three major organs being affected: the vascular, kidneys, and of course the heart center, the vascular. That also affects the brain and can lead to early dementia. Okay, so the production of cortisol and the production of norepinephrine in stressful settings can lead to physiological ailments. So there is a direct connection between the two.
Wow. So what have you done to be healthy, knowing these things? And I guess I assume that you have been stressed over your time while you've been working. And so you have to figure ways to deal with, some of those stressful times and moments. What can you teach us or tell us that would help us? So they are connected, as you just said, but now what do we do about it?
I mentioned the episode at Xerox about 5 years ago as I was writing my memoirs, and I wrote about that episode. I realized that I had actually learned from it, because what had happened was there were two things that I had missed. One of them was that Dr. Tribus, the senior vice president, had hired 3 young Black PhDs that summer to join the single Black PhD that Xerox had at the time. He had made it very clear that he wanted to have young Black PhDs in the R&D, the Research and Development Department at Xerox. So it probably was more important to him that Frank Douglas would do well than it was to Frank Douglas. So I missed that. The second thing I missed was what was my desired outcome. My desired outcome was not for the senior vice president to go and have tough words with my boss. My desired outcome was to get a good project. I wanted to show the stuff I had learned and that I could do. So had I reframed and had I gone to Dr. Tribus and had I said, Dr. Tribus, could you help Steve, my boss, find me a good project? I might have retired from Xerox. For heaven's sake, he was 2-3 levels above my boss. He would have gone into his office. He would have said, give the man a good project. It would have happened yesterday. Bang. Reframing. So as I was writing my memoirs, I suddenly realized that, as a matter of fact, after that, the way that I dealt with discrimination issues in medical school, in the pharmaceutical industry, in academia, was I reframed. And what does reframing mean? Reframing means finding a better problem to solve. And what's a better problem to solve? Well, a better problem to solve is a problem that is related to the one that you have. But if you were to solve this better problem, it would also improve the lot of others in your group or connected in your group. And I tell people, think of it this way. You're being discriminated against. It doesn't matter how empathetic your boss is. You go to your boss and you say, I'm being discriminated against. Immediately that person becomes defensive, no matter how well-meaning they are. You go to your boss and you say, on the other hand, in meetings, some people raise their hands and they're ignored, or they make a contribution, they're ignored, and someone else makes the same contribution, that person is praised. Is there something you can do to improve the way we run meetings so that all ideas are brought forward? That boss is more likely to listen to that. And then as he or she starts to listen, then you say, and if you solve that problem, it would help me, because I'm one of those people who, when I raise my hands, I'm ignored. That's the better problem to solve.
That's the better problem to solve. Wow.
So what I learned how to do from that episode is that when faced with discrimination, of course I suffered pain. Of course I was angry and upset. But I always told myself, you owe it to yourself to limit the amount of time you stay sad, the amount of time you stay angry, etc. You owe it to yourself to find a better problem to solve, because your well-being is at stake.
I love how you tie that into our health and our well-being and us being there. And you talked about reframing earlier as we started this conversation, and as you started this group called Safe Haven as a result of the murder of George Floyd. Kind of talk about that and what you've been able to do in this space, and how you've been able to help others and teach others about this whole reframing concept and how it works.
Well, when I set up Safe Haven Dialogues, I brought together a group of individuals, and we interviewed 18 individuals. And my book, Until You Walk in My Shoes, a reframing methodology to overcome systemic discrimination, reports those interviews and describes the reframing process and demonstrates in these interviews how to use the reframing process. So that's one of the things which we've done. And now I spend time, doing webinars, giving workshops, and training people in the methodology, how to use issues of equity and inclusion. The premise of the reframing process is that every organization, even the family, is based on equity and inclusion. The parents decide this is the way we live to treat each other fairly. And the children in the family, they practice those behaviors that show that each is valued and each belongs in the family. It's equity and inclusion. From the family to the most complicated organization, it's basically that. And as a matter of fact, if you take any organization and you take any individual in that organization and you query where they sit with respect to equity and inclusion, you can define a number of cultures that they're sitting in. You can define, we do a matrix, you can define 4 cultures that they're sitting in, and based on that, it can help you to identify whom the allies might be and how they might find that better problem to solve, to address their discrimination issue.
How do we find, as you stated before, the right problem to ask, or the right problem as we're trying to reframe, and we're in this emotion and we're angry and these things have happened and we're asking the wrong questions?
Well, this is why we go through this frame of really trying to understand and what we do is we take an individual who has a problem. Okay, they're very upset about it, and we start off by asking them, "What's your desired outcome?" Because a lot of times we focus on the pain, etc., and we don't ask ourselves what's really desired outcome. So we start off with what's the desired outcome. And then we talk about what's the environment like in which this problem you're having happening, and then talk about what the problem is, what the situation is. And at the end of that, tell us what you think the problem is. Now, by the time they've gone through that, we then, we call them our VIPs, victors over injustice in their profession. These are colleagues of mine in the Safe Haven Dialogues who've been trained in this process. We look at the case and we examine that case from a viewpoint of what are the issues of equity, what are the issues of inclusion. And then we plot the matrix. Now, once you have the matrix, then you can ask other questions like, okay, where are the allies? Are the allies along the equity axis or along the inclusion axis? You can ask yourself questions like, where's the point of influence? Okay. So by asking these questions and looking at the matrix, you begin to identify where you might have a solution. That then leads you to what's the better problem to solve is.
Oh man, I get it. That's so good because you think about your solution minded, but at the same time, you're looking at the wholeness. Because when I think of like equity and I think of, inclusion in those processes that are there, sometimes, for lack of me having a better word, disdiagnosed or diagnosed incorrectly, that maybe these things are not happening at the belief level that I have that they're happening. And sometimes then they may be, but instead of trying to solve for, I've decided this is happening, and this is how I'm going to get angry and I'm going to lash out and I'm going to do all these things, I'm going to figure out everything that's happening and then create like you said, not create, or go through a matrix. And then as a result of the matrix, now let's find a solution that works where I can move forward. Because I think so many people,
and not only works for me, but works for others who are affected by this. The other thing I tell people is, and I've watched this happen. Somebody has a problem, and their workmates, their friends, colleagues are very sympathetic to them. And then one day the problem gets solved, they come back to the group, they're very happy, and they're surprised that there are some people who don't seem to be terribly happy. And they expect everybody to be happy for them. And they can't figure it out. Well, it's very simple. Many times, those other people who are not happy, they also have problems. Might even be the same problem that you had. Now, your problem has been solved, but theirs have not been solved. So how do you expect them to be happy for you?
Yeah.
You know, so if you had addressed the problem that also touched them one way or the other, they're more likely to be happy for you.
That is so cool. I'm so intrigued, and would you say the book is Until You Walked in My Shoes?
Yes, and the subtitle is a reframing methodology to overcome systemic discrimination.
I can't wait to go pick it up and read it and this glean some of the things that the solution might be. I just finished a book called The Decision Formula and how to make decisions that'll change. 5 steps to making decisions that'll change your life. But at the same time, I'm thinking through even before I wrote that, I think there's some work that has to be done before you can make some of those major decisions. If you haven't reframed it, if you haven't looked at, you can only make the decision from the viewpoint or the perspective you're looking at. And until you stopped and said, wait a minute, these perspectives might not be the ones, the lens that I should be looking through. Maybe I should be looking through a different lens.
And that's very well said. A lot of times the solutions we make depends on the lens we're looking through. I have a podcast which is called Reframing for Resilience, and one guest that I had on who used to work in the optometry.
Okay.
He's an HR director. Actually said it very nicely. He said, when you think of solving problems with respect to looking at it from a diverse perspective, it's like going to the optometrist, and they put on a frame, and then they put one set of lenses in, and they put another set of lenses in, and finally you get a combination. And I said, yes, you're absolutely correct. If you're not looking through the right combination of lenses, you're not going to see the problem correctly. And if you're not seeing the problem correctly, your solution can't possibly be relevant to the problem you have.
I'll let you get one more question, then I'll have you kind of talk. But how has your faith helped you through all of these processes, through your life, and all the different lenses that you've had to look through and reframing you've had to do? Have you relied on your faith?
Well, as I told you, I was grounded in the evangelical. Mm-hmm. And so, that is sort of my core. However, I had a crisis moment about 2 years into being in America, in which I decided to step away from organized religion. It was also the time of Tammy Faye and whatever the name was, and Swaggart was the other guy. Okay. And so here were these guys who were preaching fire and brimstone, and and were recidivists. It wasn't that they made an error once and they, as we all do, they asked for forgiveness. Swaggart was caught with a prostitute 2-3 times, and thereafter was still preaching fire and brimstone. And so I decided to step away from that and have, my faith be something that is just personal. Mm-hmm. And as I told myself, as I was having that discussion myself, I had a whom I call my stepfather, really was somebody who helped us. My mother was a single mom and never sought help. And so it's the closest I came to a father. So and I said to myself, I want to live my life, and I called him Uncle Willie. I want to live my life like Uncle Willie. He was the kindest man I knew. He helped everybody that he could help. And I said, that's how I want to live my life. And if things go badly, I take responsibility. If things go well, I thank whatever gods may be from Invictus, whatever gods may be. I thank them. Okay, and so that's how my faith goes. And I actually do believe faith without works is dead. So when people talk about faith, okay, I don't have much unless I see them doing stuff, okay, to tell me about faith. It sort of loses me, okay. You only have faith. So as a matter of fact, I saw your 5 or 6 things: identity, faith, trust, health, etc. And I said, the one thing that I would have done a little bit to it, they're all nouns. Trust could be a verb, but they're basically nouns. I like verbs. And I would add refrain.
Okay, I like that.
It's not only, yes, I know my identity. I know whom to trust and when to trust and where to trust. I have faith, and I'm going to use my faith, okay? And I'm going to use the health I have to tell me how to reframe to solve the problem.
That is so cool. Last few minutes as we kind of complete, there's things we didn't get to talk about. This has been one of the most interesting, intriguing conversations I've had in a long time, and I have enjoyed you tremendously. What didn't we talk about that you want to make sure that anybody listening to this podcast gets to hear?
Well, the one thing I would like to probably stress, which you started off with, as a matter of fact, in the book which I mentioned, Until You Walk in My Shoes, one of the things that struck me, and I did all of the interviews, is that when I asked the question of the interviewees, how do they feel now, many years in some cases after the event that they were telling me, they actually described it as though they were having, some actually said PTSD. And that led me to wonder whether there's something, what I call OCSD, namely occupational cultural stress disorder. And I think a lot of the trauma that we have at work, or in social situations or in family situations that are based on prejudices and discrimination that impacts our well-being, may very well be producing this sort of, cultural stress disorder that we are totally unaware of, and that is making people ill. And so it's something I think, and I'm glad that you put a lot of focus on trauma. People who have been discriminated against are traumatized, period. And that impacts their well-being and that of their family, because it plays out in the family. The stress that they have, that plays out in the family. So I really hope that people will have an opportunity to actually look at the book Until You Walk in My Shoes, because they will see it's a very 45 pages which describes why equity and inclusion is important and how you use it to reframe, and then the rest are these examples. So you read the first 45, and then by the time you've read, choose 3 or 4 examples, you've got a good feel for what reframing is and how to apply reframing.
Oh man, well, thank you. Again, the book is Until You Walk Into My Shoes. This is Dr. Frank Douglas that we've had the pleasure of listening to for the last hour, and I hope you reach out and you figure out ways to watch his podcast. I can tell you, if you are a person who believes you're stuck, or you're a person who believes that you might need to reframe something that is going on in your life that you just can't figure out why it is the way it is, that you would be able to contact him. And for me, I can't wait to pick up the book. I can't wait to get it and dig into it, because I just want to say, sir, you are making a difference and an impact in people's lives. And I am glad you were born where you were born. I'm glad you came into the country when you did. You have a perspective that many of us don't. And you were able to take that and make some incredible success. And so being on this podcast, I hope we get lots of listeners and lots of people. Again, if you have not subscribed, you can see why it's important that you hit the notification button and do whatever the YouTube things are that we can do, that we can have any conversations. And I hope you'll be willing to come back. I know you're probably writing another book and you're doing some other things. And when you do, please let me know. And we will be able to have that conversation again and talk again. I have thoroughly been educated. Not only educated, I have just been, I say to people that I'm the luckiest person who gets to do these, because I get to interview people like yourself that allow me to grow and to learn. And so I get to watch all 100 episodes that we're on now, and and continue to move on where other people may skip a few, but I learn on every single one. So thank you again for being part of the show.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. And people can go to my website. It's safehavendialogues-llc.com. That's safehavendialogues-llc.com, and they'll see a lot of information there.
Perfect. And we'll make sure we put those in the comments as well, pin them to the comments, so people will be able to access it very quickly. So thank you again. You guys have a wonderful, awesome, just incredible day. Don't forget, I believe that you're God's greatest gift, and he loves you if you allow him to. And we will talk to you on the next one. Have a great day.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Arnold. It's been a pleasure.
You too as well.